I heard Rick Clark, I think his name is. I'm blanking out. To look, was the executive director of the CFP. Was on Coach K's Basketball and Beyond show when I was driving home last night with that podcast, and he talked about, and I thought this sounded dismissive by the CFP folks. He said since the games have been named, they've been at the first round sites, helping the schools make sure they're ready to put on a first round game, put on a game of this magnitude. This will be the biggest game in the history of all these programs, and we want to make sure it comes off well. The first round host sites are Notre Dame, Texas, Penn State, and Ohio State. I don't think Penn State SMU is in any way the biggest game in the history of Beaver State. It's the most historic because it's very historic because it's a playoff game.
Go ahead.
It is not the biggest game in the history of this program. There has to be more games than this. There has to be 5 games at least you were more excited to attend than the one this weekend, right? Or not?
5? It's close. That's a really good question. Like that's because man. I don't.
It's not number one.
It is not number one.
Think about Notre Dame. Think about Texas. Think about Ohio State. These games this weekend are not the most important games in the history of those programs. Now, Ohio State, if they lose, it might be one of the more meaningful games.
Sure, yeah,
might be one of the more meaningful games. But I don't. I just thought that sounded question. a little dismissive,
it's a little pompous. I think is fair.
That's the word I was looking for.
I think that's fair. I don't know on that one, Steve. I think it is one of the games that I'm most excited for. But you're right. If they win, like in a way, like we're gonna think about the next game and maybe the next game, and then probably definitely the last game, right? Like
right.
So I don't think they're necessarily the most important or the most historical. Certainly from the matchup perspective, really. For other than I think the most intriguing is Indiana and Notre Dame because they're like kind of playing for a legitimate state championship because they've all played all the 3 schools will have ended up playing each other. But yeah, no, I think I didn't know how to. I've been wrestling with that, so I'm glad you brought that up. I don't think I'm top 5, but it's certainly top 10 of most excited to go to.
And that's fine. But from the CFP, of these 4 games this weekend, I think there's one with my deep knowledge, right, of Ohio State and Texas and Notre Dame. There's probably one that maybe has a chance to set an attendance record, and that's Indiana Notre Dame, right? Just because the people from Indiana are geeked. But I don't know. I'd have to look at what was there for like a Miami game or somebody else. Because, this is not the biggest game in the history of Notre Dame Stadium. It just no way.
There's no way.
So I just thought that sounded, from the CFP's side of it, nice logo and all. But dang, these programs know what they're doing. For as tough as we are and nitpicky as we are about Penn State and game presentation and whatever else, I think they kind of do know what they're doing, at least at this point of the season. Beginning of next season, they'll start at ground zero again and build back up. But like for the CFP to like diss these programs that way, it sounded pompous.
Okay, I think that's fair. I think that that feels pompous. That is not showing reverence to really like anything prior to the BCS era. And maybe even some of the games in the BCS era for some of those other schools, right? Like there was what was the Ohio State Michigan game? There was the night 1 versus 2. That's a particularly big game, and DKR has certainly had its fair share of massively important games as well. I think that was good. You asked another question kind of related to this. You said that you think Penn State SMU could be the most overlooked of the first round matchups. Explain.
2 college game day shows on site. Neither one at Beaver Stadium, right? And again, it's a bad noon games are bad for game day, right? Because fans go in, although you could do the studio inside. I just think it's because it's the least compelling in many ways. It's just overlooked a little bit. Like people are like, oh, okay, they're playing that game at noon. Penn State's going to go there and win. It doesn't feel. Tennessee, Ohio State is the closest in terms of the seeds. The 8-9, and Indiana Notre Dame is state championship, one of the best stories of the year against traditional Notre Dame program. Texas is later in the day, so maybe some more eyeballs. It just feels like this is the sleepy starter to the day on Saturday in some ways. And then they've got an hour for people's attention, or an NFL game kicks off at 1, which is going to impact viewership.
Particularly, wow, we haven't even talked about that too. Particularly, I think because the game's on TNT, and that even though it's going to be ESPN graphics, ESPN packaging, it's going to feel a little unfamiliar and weird. So I think that's also a small aspect to it, and I really think I don't know that Texas and Clemson is that interesting to me. Just because other than like I don't know, I think Dabo's time is kind of come and gone. In terms of like him being a central star in the sport. I think Sark is probably a bigger star in the sport, at least from that perspective. So I think that I think, like I said, I think Notre Dame Indiana is interesting for a lot of different reasons, particularly if you're a college football like nerd, kind of like us. And then Tennessee Ohio State is two big brands colliding in prime time. So I think that is a fair assessment to say that it's overlooked, at least from the media aspect. We didn't talk about the fact that the Steelers play at 4:30 on Sunday, which is also like I wonder if that, like, part of me has to wonder if that was part of the reason why that game is at noon. Aside from the fact, like, if Penn State was playing Clemson, like, let's say those, like, Clemson and SMU had switched seeds almost, would this game be at noon? And I don't know that it would, but that's like it would be fascinating to see what the impact on a Steelers game would be in terms of TV ratings, because this was something, um, my college roommate Andy Medore, he's a Ravens fan, so of course we always text about those games, and he's like, you realize that like we could be in for like a little bit of a headache where we have to watch a Penn State game, but also worry about the Steelers Ravens game, at the same time.
I think Penn State Clemson, maybe that would have been at 4. Certainly, it still could have been at noon. Penn State was not going to be was not going to be the Friday night game or the Saturday night game.
Right.
I mean, for as much as there's power in the brand, the Ohio State brand is a little bigger. Notre Dame's brand is a little bigger, and the way the stuff fell, they were just the more compelling night games that ABC was going to take. Say, thank you very much. We're going to take our big ratings on Friday night and Saturday night. And TNT and Max, thanks for helping us out by taking these games, and good luck with those ratings there. I mean, they're still ABC, ESPN products, but
Yeah. Okay.